I think it works against the family values. I think that it's benefiting the few for the detriment of the many, if that makes sense to you. And I mean this sincerely. I'm not trying to be disrespectful.
No, I'm sure you're not, and I appreciate your position. My position is the opposite. To have equality among citizens means to have the equality of opportunity, to have all the same things that everybody else has, the responsibilities as well as the rights. And the Declaration of Independence guaranteed the right to pursuit of happiness. Do you think anybody really has the right to the pursuit of happiness if they don't have the right to marry the person they love? And gay people are just like straight people. We just have the same emotions, the same feelings, the same bonds, but we're denied the ability to commit ourselves to another human being for our lives. We're denied the opportunity for responsibility. We want to have that responsibility. We come from regular families. We want to be married and have the same rights and responsibilities as our brothers and sisters in the same families. So that's what this is about, a very fundamental right. I don't think it'll hurt anybody at all. No single heterosexual marriage would in any way be changed by this. Religions don't have to acknowledge it, but civilly, as a matter of civil rights, as a matter of the state's respect to the citizen, the ability to have an equal right to marry is one of the most fundamental rights known to man.
Did you know that you were a subject of an editorial today in the Wall Street Journal?
I did not know that.
Well, we'll share it with you in a minute. Detroit, Michigan, Democratic line. Hello, you're on with Christopher Hitchens and Andrew Sullivan.
Good morning, gentlemen. Love C-SPAN. I got two questions for Christopher. Christopher, have you had any right-wing backlash from the book that you wrote about Henry Kissinger? I think it's a great book. And the other question I have for you, do you think it's right for Israel to be occupying Palestine for the last 35 years?
To the first, I've had some disobliging reviews from conservatives, but as also from liberals about Henry Kissinger. But no, I've also had quite a number of platforms offered me by conservative groups and organizations, and some friendly reviews from that quarter too, because remember, I was mentioning it to Brian briefly a few minutes ago, it was Henry Kissinger who defended the right of the Chinese Communist Party to massacre the students of Beijing in the main square of the city. It was Henry Kissinger who groveled to Brezhnev, told President Ford not to invite Alexander Solzhenitsyn into the Oval Office, and so forth. I mean, a practitioner of depraved realpolitik, as offensive to a principled conservative, I would hope, as to anyone on the left. So that's roughly how it's shaken out, and that's been one of the nicer parts of the reception. As to your question about Palestine, I've believed from the first that there is only one possible solution to a situation where there are two peoples, two nationalisms in one land, and that's two states. And I feel myself vindicated very much by the consequences of, which are very plain for everyone to see, of what happens if you don't have that. And not only that, but how those consequences, those alternatives are going to get worse and worse and worse. It's narrowing now to the point where either Israel would have to expel the Palestinians completely or institute a system of formal apartheid. Those are the only alternatives to statehood, and we like to think we had better be right, though it's not among the human rights issues that Mr. Bush ever cares to mention.
In today's...
That would teach people that if there'd been two states all along, we would have been spared much.
Sorry to interrupt. In today's Wall Street Journal, it's under this headline, Scribbler's Ethics. This is all about Enron, and I'll get right to the point here about Mr. Sullivan. Meanwhile, the internet ethicist, Andrew Sullivan, has been denouncing any journalist who's ever taken a dollar from Enron. This includes our contributor, Peggy Noonan, who disclosed last week in her OpinionJournal.com column that she billed Enron $250 an hour for 100 to 200 hours of speechwriting work. In other words, she got paid like any other contract employee, which is called business between consenting adults. The first time she wrote about Enron for us was also when she disclosed her Enron fees, so she has nothing to apologize for. Certainly not to Mr. Sullivan, who recently wrote a fine piece for this page on the failure of Talk magazine, but then without asking, resold the article to the Times of London, which didn't bother to give us credit. Mr. Sullivan's explanation is that he didn't think we had international publication rights, although the Wall Street Journal is distributed in London. Leaving aside the fine points of copyright copyright law, Mr. Sullivan's behavior may not have been unethical, but it wasn't very nice.
Oh, please. I had no idea they wanted to run it again in Europe, and my editor in London asked me to redo it. I did a slightly different version in London. As for Peggy Noonan, I do think she's by far the most innocent of all these columnists who turn out to be on boondoggles from Enron. But I would point out something. She worked $250 an hour, 100 to 200. Now, someone doesn't remember whether it was 100 or 200 hours of work. Doesn't she have a 1099? Can she actually tell us how much she actually got from Enron? I would also say that she said in her own piece, none of the work she did somehow ever got used. It all just never quite got into Ken Lay's speeches. It was never actually a substantive piece of work that was actually, you could show was actually part of Enron's business. Now, I'm sure Peggy Noonan, who's a perfectly decent and good person, didn't realize fully that she was being completely conned by these people. The truth is, this corporation threw money everywhere, and it threw it also at journalists. People like Bill Kristol, $100,000 minimum, next to nothing but show up for a couple of weekends in a luxury place or resort. Paul Krugman, the New York Times columnist, $50,000. Gary Kudlow, National Review columnist, $50,000, all for doing very little at all. Now, if someone comes along and asks you, would you like $50,000 for doing virtually nothing? A good journalist says, what are you really trying to buy here? And all I've done, the sin I've done, is point it out and just say, if we as journalists are going to start criticizing politicians for taking this kind of money, then we can hardly be taking much more of it ourselves and never disclosing it until we have to.
And can I just add something?
Sure.
And by the way, I should say in Andrew's defense, I mean, even if he played fast and loose with the Wall Street Journal at the Times, reselling a piece of yours twice is nothing ethically comparable at all with what
they said he just wasn't very nice.
Well, anyhow.
I thought they would be a little above that kind of thing.
The principle that some corporate culture seems to apply, including Enron, seems to me to be that of organized crime. The principle of that is you dirty up as many people as you possibly can, because then anyone who blows the whistle can be accused of spoiling it for everyone. So journalists, politicians from both parties, all across the board. And they seem also to have succeeded in imposing the law of omerta on the administration, which says, no, it's only our business how we deal with Enron. What do you peasants want to know about it?
When I emailed Bill Kristol to say, come on, what's going on here? How much did you get? What was this all about? And who else was on this? They had an advisory board, this kind of shell institution, to pay off all these journalists. He said, and I quote him, I will not rat out the others.
Sun Valley, Idaho, Republican line. Go ahead, please. Hello.
Hello.
Fish wrapped in newspaper.
This is Rusty from actually Haley, Idaho. And I believe you actually asked the wrong question. The question should be, if we're not the greatest country in the world right now, who is? Nobody's ever asked the people that are talking, as far as I know, on telephone, who the greatest country is, if it isn't us.
And in your opinion, is there a country that is greater than the United States?
We're not perfect, but who in the heck is?
Okay, I asked the wrong question. The real question I wanted to ask, and I didn't ask it very articulately, is it wise for politicians and journalists to say all the time out loud, we are the greatest country in the world?
I sort of agree with Christopher that I think if you have to yell that, you aren't. I mean, it's a good indication. I think there's a certain kind of patriotism which doesn't need to be expressed so crudely. It doesn't have to have a slogan on it. It doesn't have to have sort of be shouted from the rooftops. I think that after September 11th, however, the extraordinary flourishing of a kind of patriotism, the flags and everything, was something actually relatively healthy. In fact, extremely healthy. It was saying, look, we do love this place. We do care about it. We're not going to stand by while other people, for evil purposes, try and destroy it.